Collared peccaries are diurnal creatures that live in groups of up to 50 individuals, averaging between 6 and 9 animals. They sleep in burrows, but sometimes can be found in caves, abandoned mines, old desert tunnels, or among logs, felled trees and abandoned timber. However, collared peccaries are not completely diurnal. In central Arizona, they are often more active at night, and less so in the heat of the daytime. Although they usually ignore humans, they will react if they feel threatened. They defend themselves with their tusks. A collared peccary can release a strong musk or give a sharp bark if it is alarmed. Amazonian people sometimes raise and tame juvenile collared peccaries, if they are encountered. Cubanochirus was one of the largest known pig species to ever live, but its most distinctive features were its horns, with a small pair above its eyes and a single large forward-pointing one on its forehead. A few specimens lack the large horn, and so some paleontologists consider it to be a sexually dimorphic trait possessed only by males. But it's currently unclear whether this was actually the case, since at least one hornless skull has been reported with the distinctive larger tusks also associated with male pigs, so it's possible that the horned and hornless Cubanochirus were actually separate species. Celabochirus was a giant species of pig, known from the island of Luzon. Living around 800,000 years ago in the mid-Pleistocene, it had enormous tusks and stood around 1 meter tall at the shoulder, similar in size to the very largest modern pigs, the African giant forest hogs. The giant forest hogs are also some of its closest living relatives, along with the river pigs, and back in the Miocene and Pliocene similar pigs were present in Asia. Celabochirus ancestors probably arrived in the Philippines from Taiwan, and eventually spread onwards to the Indonesian island of Sulawesi to the south, where another species of Celabochirus existed. Red River hogs are often active during the day, but are primarily nocturnal or crepuscular. They typically live in small groups of approximately 6 to 10 animals, composed of a single adult male and a number of adult females and their young. However, much larger groups, some with over 30 individuals, have been noted in particularly favorable habitats. The boar defends his harem aggressively against predators, with leopards being a particularly common threat. The species is omnivorous, eating mainly roots, bulbs and tubers, and supplements its diet with fruit, seeds, nuts, water plants, grasses, fungi, eggs and dead animal and even insects, snails and small reptiles. It uses its large muzzle to snuffle about in the soil in search of food, as well as scraping the ground with their tusks and forefeet. Boars are somewhat larger than sows, and have distinct conical protuberances on either side of the snout and rather small, sharp tusks. The facial protuberances are bony and probably protect the boar's facial tendons during head-to-head combat with other males. The giant forest hog is the largest living wild member of the pig family, with males weighing up to 275 kilograms and measuring up to 2 meters in length. They are social animals that live in small family groups consisting of a dominant male, several females, and their young. These groups can sometimes merge to form larger herds. They are omnivorous, feeding on a variety of plant material, including grasses, roots, fruits, and bark. They also eat small animals and carrion when available. Known for their secretive nature, they are mainly nocturnal and crepuscular, being most active during the dawn and dusk hours. They are also excellent diggers, using their powerful snouts to root for food. When threatened, giant forest hogs can be quite aggressive. They have strong tusks and robust bodies that they use to fend off predators. While not currently listed as endangered, the giant forest hog faces threats from habitat destruction and hunting. Their preference for dense forest habitats makes them particularly vulnerable to deforestation. Babirussas are generally solitary or found in small family groups. Males are typically more solitary, while females and their young can be seen together. They are excellent swimmers and can cross rivers and even small stretches of the ocean to move between islands in search of food and mates. They have relatively hairless skin, which is quite different from other wild pigs. Their skin is also loose and tough, providing some protection against predators and the environment. They are considered vulnerable due to habitat loss, hunting, and competition with domestic animals. Their populations are declining, and they are protected under Indonesian law. The upper canine teeth of male babirussas grow upwards through the skin of their snout, rather than growing downward or outward like those of other pigs. These tusks can curve backward toward the forehead. If the tusks are not worn down or broken naturally, they can continue to grow and may penetrate the skin of the forehead. In extreme cases, the tusks can grow long enough to pierce the skull, potentially causing serious injury or death. Unlike other wild pigs that use their tusks for digging or fighting, babirussas do not use their tusks in the same way. This lack of regular wear means the tusks can grow unchecked. The exact evolutionary purpose of these dramatic tusks is not entirely clear. They might serve as a display feature for attracting mates or deterring rivals, although their impractical and dangerous growth pattern suggests that they are a secondary sexual characteristic that can be maladaptive. The oldest specimen of Metridocoeris dates to around 3.4 million years ago from the Usno Formation in Ethiopia. It probably evolved from a recent immigrant from Eurasia. Metridocoeris was a large animal, 1.5 meters in length, resembling a giant warthog. It had two large pairs of tusks which were pointed sideways and curved upwards. The teeth, especially the third molars, become increasingly high-crowned in later species. The various species are usually thought to have been grazers, though this has been questioned for the earliest low-crowned species. Desert warthogs live in social groups called sounders consisting mostly of females and their offspring, while males tend to live in solitude or form bachelor groups. A sounder occupies a home range of about 10 square kilometers, which is usually centered on a water hole. The warthogs dig a number of burrows, or take over holes excavated by other animals, and move from one to another. Where the ranges of two different groups overlap, each may use the same burrow on different occasions. The groups do not interact to any great extent. Desert warthogs are diurnal and are largely herbivorous. One of the older females leads the group and they forage for grasses, leafy plants, flowers and fruit. They dig up rhizomes, edible tubers and bulbs with their snouts and tusks and will eat insects when food is scarce, and even carrion. They sometimes eat dung, including their own, and will tear bark from trees. The common warthog is the only pig species that has adapted to grazing and savanna habitats. Its diet is omnivorous, composed of grasses, roots, berries and other fruits, bark, fungi, insects, eggs and carrion. Warthogs are powerful diggers, using both their snouts and feet. When feeding, they often bend their front feet backwards and move around on the wrists. Calloused pads that protect the wrists during such movement form early in the development of the fetus. Although they can dig their own burrows, they often occupy abandoned burrows of aardvarks and other animals. The common warthog commonly reverses into burrows, with its head facing the opening and ready to burst out if necessary. They will wallow in mud to cope with high temperatures and huddle together to cope with low temperatures. The interaction between warthogs and mongooses is an example of mutualism, where both species benefit from the association. Warthogs often lie down and allow mongooses to climb over their bodies. Mongooses use this opportunity to groom the warthogs, removing ticks, fleas and other parasites from their skin. By allowing mongooses to groom them, they reduce their parasite load, which can help prevent diseases and improve their overall health and comfort. And mongooses gain a reliable food source by eating the parasites they find on the warthogs. Bearded pigs are named for the prominent beard of coarse hair that grows on the sides of their snouts. They also have a tuft of hair on their chin, giving them a distinctive look. They are omnivorous and have a varied diet that includes roots, fruits, berries, small animals, insects, and carrion. They are known to forage extensively and are important seed dispersers in their habitats. One of the most remarkable behaviors of bearded pigs is their seasonal migration. In some areas, they undertake long migrations in search of food, particularly following the fruiting patterns of trees in the forest. They are social animals and are typically found in groups called sounders, which can consist of a few individuals to large herds of several dozen pigs. It is classified as vulnerable due to habitat loss, hunting, and competition with domestic pigs. Their populations are declining in many areas. As opportunistic feeders, bearded pigs play a significant role in their ecosystem by helping to control insect populations, disperse seeds, and recycle nutrients through their foraging activities. As suggested by its name, the pygmy hog differs from other members of the Suidae by the extreme reduction of its body size, and it is the smallest pig species. An adult weighs between 6 and 10 kilograms. From its hoof to its shoulder, it ranges from about 20 to 25 centimeters tall. Pygmy hogs also have a unique nesting behavior which the tall grasses of their habitat enable them to perform. In the wild, they make firm nests in which to sleep by digging small trenches, using dry grasses and vegetation to line them. They sleep in these nests at night, but also retreat to these nests during the heat of the day, and use them to warm up in the winter. The nests are also used for birthing and to hide and protect newborn piglets. The pygmy hog is considered to be one of the most threatened mammalian species today. Unfortunately, humans have posed one of the greatest threats to pygmy hogs, as they have severely and negatively impacted the pygmy hog's natural habitat. Since pygmy hogs live among some of the most important thatching grasses, their native environments are being destroyed by humans for commercial purposes. Wild boars are one of the most widely distributed mammals in the world, found across Europe, Asia, and North Africa. They are known for their intelligence and excellent memory. They can remember the locations of food sources and are capable of problem-solving to access difficult-to-reach food. They live in matriarchal groups called sounders, consisting of females and their offspring. Adult males are generally solitary, joining the groups only during the mating season. They have a robust build with thick fur and tusks that can grow up to 5 centimeters in males. These tusks are used for digging, foraging, and defense against predators and rivals. As omnivores and prolific foragers, wild boars play a significant role in their ecosystems. They help in seed dispersal, soil aeration through their rooting behavior and control of insect populations. Due to their adaptability and high reproductive rate, wild boars often come into conflict with humans, particularly farmers, as they can cause significant damage to crops and property. Despite often being considered pests due to their tendency to raid crops, wild boars also benefit agriculture by controlling pest populations, such as insects and small rodents, through their foraging behavior. Wild boars can interbreed with domestic pigs, resulting in hybrid offspring. These hybrids can sometimes possess characteristics of both wild and domestic pigs, complicating population management. Pigs are relatively intelligent animals, roughly on par with dogs. They distinguish each other as individuals, spend time in play, and form structured communities. They have good long-term memory and they experience emotions, changing their behavior in response to the emotional states of other pigs. In terms of experimental tasks, pigs can perform tasks that require them to identify the locations of objects, they can solve mazes, and they can work with a simple language of symbols. They display self-recognition in a mirror. Pigs have been trained to associate different sorts of music with food and social isolation respectively, and could communicate the resulting positive or negative emotion to untrained pigs. Pigs were domesticated in the Neolithic, both in East Asia and in the Near East. When domesticated pigs arrived in Europe, they extensively interbred with wild boar but retained their domesticated features. They are farmed primarily for meat, called pork. China is the world's largest pork producer, followed by the European Union and then the United States. Around 1.5 billion pigs are raised each year, producing some 120 million tons of meat. Intensive pig production involves practices such as castration, earmarking, tattooing for litter identification, tail docking, which are often done without the use of anesthetic. Teeth clipping of piglets is also done to curtail cannibalism, behavioral instability and aggression, and tail biting, which are induced by the cramped environment. In indoor farming, pigs are allowed to be kept with less than 1 square meter of space per pig. While wild piglets remain with their mothers for around 12 to 14 weeks, farmed piglets are weaned and removed from their mothers at between 2 and 5 weeks old. Of the piglets born alive, 10% to 18% will not reach weaning age, instead succumbing to disease, starvation, dehydration, or accidental crushing by their mothers. Unusually small runt piglets are typically killed immediately by staff through blunt trauma to the head. During a 1923 expedition by the American Museum of Natural History to Inner Mongolia, China, a huge mammal skull was discovered dating to the Middle Eocene. About 83 centimeters long, with small low-set eyes, it was named Andrewsarchus mongoliensis in honor of expedition member Roy Chapman Andrews. Almost a century later, that one skull is still all we have. And despite this animal's popularity among paleofans, we actually know very little about it. It was originally classified as a Mesonychian, leading to the many depictions of it as a sort of big bad wolf. But more recent studies have placed it in the even-toed ungulates instead, with some suggestions that it might be most closely related to entelodonts, hippos and whales. Although it was certainly a big animal, it may not have been the giant super predator it's often depicted as. Its teeth aren't particularly specialized and resemble those of entelodonts, suggesting it may have been more of an opportunistic omnivore than a dedicated carnivore. Without more material, we just don't know for certain. So, frustratingly, the rest of Andrewsarchus' body remains a mystery. Echinodon was around the size of a pig or a black bear. With a body mass of around 250 kilograms, the skull had a relatively short muzzle and large sideways expanded zygomatic arches, making the skull nearly as wide as it is long. There was a very high sagittal crest, which connected later to an expanded nuchal crest. These two structures, together with the large cheekbone arches, indicate that the musculature of the jaws was extremely powerful. The teeth of Echinodon were bunodont and quite large in size. The dental formula was the primitive condition of artiodactyls with 3 incisors, a canine, 4 premolars and 3 molars. The first lower premolar was present in juveniles but were absent in adults. The upper molars had greatly thickened enamel. The limbs were short, with the forelimbs being slightly shorter than the hind limbs, with the manus having 4 digits. Consisting of a partial jawbone and a humerus, and dating to the mid-Eocene, the remains of Helohyidae clearly belonged to an early even-toed ungulate, but one much bigger than the rabbit-sized herbivores known from that time. This was something closer in size and build to a large modern pig, standing at least 1 meter tall at the shoulder. These pig-like animals were large opportunistic omnivores, possibly occupying a similar ecological role to the later entelodonts, with some late Eocene forms reaching sizes comparable to black bears. It was one of the earliest known large-bodied members of the group, and shows that these animals must have increased in size very rapidly during their early evolution, going from rabbit-sized to pig-sized within just a couple of million years. The holotype of Brachyhyops was described by Edwin Colbert in 1938 as a medium-sized skull with a short snout, similar to a modern peccary. The skull is broad with separated parietal crests and expanded zygomatic arches, typical of entelodonts. Its fossils, dating back to the early to Upper Eocene, are found mainly in Mongolia and China, with significant North American records from late Eocene deposits. These omnivorous wild boar-like animals had a varied diet including meat and vegetation, and lived in savanna woodland to open grasslands. Their wide range and adaptability underscore their ecological importance during the Eocene epoch. Entelodonts' large heads, low snouts, narrow gait, and proposed omnivorous diet inspires comparisons to suids, true pigs, and tiosuids, peccaries, and historically they have been considered closely related to these families purely on a morphological basis. However, studies which combine morphological and molecular data on artiodactyls instead suggest that entelodonts are Cetancodontamorphs, more closely related to hippos and cetaceans through their resemblance to Pakicetus, than to basal pigs like Cubanochirus and other ungulates. While entelodonts have long been classified as members of the Suina, some paleontologists have found them to be closer to whales and hippos than to pigs. Cladistic analysis of the position of whales in relation to artiodactyls and mesonychians changes radically depending on whether the giant enigmatic mammal Andrewsarchus is included, and it has been suggested that Andrewsarchus is in fact an entelodont or close relative. Entelodonts were likely omnivorous, with teeth and jaws suited for processing tough food items like roots, nuts, and fruits, as well as meat. A 2022 study confirmed their omnivorous diet, similar to wild boars, through tooth microwear analysis. They probably had a simple stomach and relied on the cecum for fermenting plant matter, adapting their diet based on seasonal availability. Their dental adaptations also suggest they consumed carrion and bones, with juvenile entelodonts having sharper teeth less suited for tough food. Some entelodonts' canine teeth showed wear patterns similar to those in modern cats, indicating regular use on hard materials like bones. They may have engaged in active predation, though this is debated. Evidence includes puncture marks on fossils and specific tooth wear. Their jaw structure allowed for a wide gape, useful for both feeding and competitive behaviors. Fossil evidence shows large bite marks on adult skulls, indicating intraspecific competition, similar to behaviors seen in modern hippos and camels. These bite marks are often found above the sinuses, suggesting head-to-head contests among males. Ribcage injuries in some fossils have also been linked to intraspecies aggression. Diodon is the largest entelodont species, with adult individuals having skulls around 90 cm long and standing approximately 1.8 meters tall at the shoulders. It had long, slender limbs with fused foreleg bones and only 2 toes on each foot. Despite its large head, its neck was relatively lightly constructed, with support provided by muscles and tendons attached to tall thoracic vertebrae spines, akin to modern bison. In terms of habitat, Diodon had a wide distribution in North America, often found in environments transitioning from dense forests to expansive prairies, potentially contributing to its extinction during the early Miocene. It adapted to grasslands with a more cursorial body plan compared to basal, losing dewclaws and developing a similar shoulder musculature to bison. As an omnivore, it likely consumed nuts, roots, vines, meat and bones, adapting its diet based on seasonal availability. While its extent of carnivory is debated, tooth wear suggests specialization in crushing bone and ripping meat. Evidence of predation and scavenging behaviors challenges the notion that Diodon relied solely on scavenging for survival. Helohyidae is an extinct genus of artiodactyl ungulate, and is among the earliest known Anthracotheriidae. The genus was extremely widespread, first being found in Asia in the Middle Eocene, in Europe during the latest Eocene, and having spread to North America by the early Oligocene. It was about 1.5 meters in body length, and had a long, vaguely horse-like head. It had small tusks which it used to uproot plants, and spoon-shaped incisors ideal for pulling and cropping water plants. Helohyidae had 5-toed hind legs and 4-toed front legs, resulting in wide feet which made it easier to walk on soft mud. It probably had similar habits to the modern hippopotamus, to which it may have been related. Some skeletal characters of Anthracotheriidae suggest they are related to hippos. The nature of the sediments in which they are fossilized implies they were amphibious, which supports the view, based on anatomical evidence, that they were ancestors of the hippopotamuses. In many respects, especially the anatomy of the lower jaw, Anthracotherium, as with other members of the family, is allied to the hippopotamus, of which it is probably an ancestral form. However, one study suggests that instead of Anthracotheriidae, another pig-like group of artiodactyls, the Paleocohorids, are the true stem group of Hippopotamidae. Recent evidence, gained from comparative gene sequencing, further suggests that hippos are the closest living relatives of whales, so, if Anthracotheriidae are stem hippos, they would also be related to whales in a clade provisionally called Hippomorpha. However, the earliest known Anthracotheriidae appear in the fossil record in the Middle Eocene, well after the Archaeocides had already taken up totally aquatic lifestyles. Although phylogenetic analyses of molecular data on extant animals strongly support the notion that hippopotamids are the closest relatives of cetaceans, the two groups are unlikely to be closely related when extant and extinct artiodactyls are analyzed. Cetaceans originated about 50 million years ago in the Tethys Sea between India and China, whereas the family Hippopotamidae is only 15 million years old, and the first Asian hippopotamids are only 6 million years old. Yet, analyses of fossil clades have not resolved the issue of cetacean relations. Archaeopotamus, characterized by its elongated mandibular symphysis, is informally known as narrow-muzzled hippos and is distinguished by 3 pairs of incisors. One species, Archaeopotamus lothigamensis, discovered in Kenya near Lake Turkana, is smaller than modern hippos and Archaeopotamus harvardi, with a slenderer skeleton, though larger than pygmy hippos. The immediate ancestor of Archaeopotamus remains unknown, though it's speculated to be a sister group to both hippos and Hexaprotodon, with fossils dating back to the end of the Pliocene epoch, around 2 million years ago. Pygmy hippos, resembling their larger counterparts, have a graviportal skeleton supporting their portly frame, standing about half the height of common hippos and weighing significantly less. Their skin, similar to common hippos, secretes a pinkish substance believed to have antiseptic properties, necessitating frequent water immersion to prevent cracking. The pygmy hippo's gracile skeleton and sloping back suggest adaptations for navigating dense forest vegetation, with longer legs and a smaller head compared to common hippos. Despite being more terrestrial than common hippos, they are still reliant on water for survival, with muscular valves in their ears and nostrils aiding submersion. Behaviorally, they differ from common hippos, living in smaller groups and exhibiting tapir-like behavior, spending much of their time hidden in rivers or dens. Their diet consists mainly of forest floor vegetation, with a diverse array of plants making up their meals, and they engage in marking trails with their feces. Pygmy hippos mate on both land and water, with a gestation period of 190 to 210 days, typically giving birth to a single calf. Conservation efforts are crucial due to habitat loss and hunting pressures, with pygmy hippos facing threats from deforestation and illegal hunting for their meat. Cypriot dwarf hippopotamus seems to have been descended from the common hippo, which probably swam across to Cyprus from the Levant region sometime in the mid to late Pleistocene. Isolated with no predators and limited space, it rapidly became dwarfed compared to its ancestors, reaching at most 75 centimeters tall at the shoulder, making it the tiniest known island hippo, and slightly smaller than the modern pygmy hippo. It became much more terrestrial, with more digit-grade feet adapted for walking and climbing over rugged rocky terrain. Its teeth suggest a diet of pig-like browsing on forest vegetation, and much like pigs they may have been opportunistic omnivores, occasionally also eating small animals and carrion. Maltese hippopotamus is substantially smaller in size than common hippopotamus as a result of insular dwarfism, having an estimated mass of approximately 900 kilograms. The diet is suggested to have been more generalist than Hippopotamus amphibius, which is predominantly a grazer, likely as a result of limited resource diversity and lack of competition, as the only other large herbivore on the island was the dwarf elephant Paleoloxodon nadriensis. The majority of findings of this species are from Gar Dalam, a cave on Malta famous for its Pleistocene fossil deposits. Madagascan dwarf hippopotamus lived in the forested highlands and was much more terrestrial than its larger cousins. Its eyes were further down on the sides of its head, and it was better adapted for walking and running around on land, with proportionally longer legs and a more digitigrade posture. It also had an unusually small brain for its size, about 30% smaller than expected, which may have been an energy-saving adaptation. The last known subfossils date to about 1,000 years ago, but surprisingly accurate accounts of similar creatures in Malagasy folklore raise the possibility that small isolated populations of these hippos may have survived into more recent times. One of the most intriguing examples is the Kilopilopitzidae, described as having large floppy ears and supposedly being sighted as recently as the 70s. Hippopotamuses are fiercely territorial, especially males. They mark their territory by spreading their dung using their tails, creating piles known as middens. They secrete a natural sunscreen substance called hipposudoric acid, which gives their skin a pinkish hue. This secretion also has antibacterial properties and protects their skin from the sun. While hippos spend most of their time in water to keep cool, they also venture onto land to graze at night. They can consume up to 70 kilograms of grass in a single evening. They have incredibly powerful jaws and large canine teeth, capable of biting through thick branches or even crushing a crocodile. They're considered one of the most dangerous animals in Africa. Despite their large size, they can surprisingly run at speeds of up to 30 kilometers per hour over short distances, especially when threatened. Hippos are well adapted for an aquatic lifestyle, with eyes, ears, and nostrils positioned on the top of their heads to allow them to see, hear, and breathe while submerged. They can close their ears and nostrils to prevent water from entering. While hippos spend much of their time in the water, they don't actually swim for long distances. Instead, they prefer to rest or sleep underwater, surfacing every few minutes to take a breath without waking fully. Hippos inhabit rivers, lakes, and other freshwater habitats throughout sub-Saharan Africa. They rely on water for cooling off, protection from predators, social interaction, and access to food sources such as aquatic plants. They are also capable of traversing land to access different water sources or grazing areas. They may travel overland for short distances, especially during the dry season when water levels recede.